Hello, thanks for checking out this video. The main topic of this video today is going to be about Christian hypocrisy, especially about what's going on in the Middle East, but it's also going to be broadly about some of my personal views on spirituality and education and stuff like that. So I'll try to stay on target here and keep this brief so you don't get too bored, but I'll make a succinct point here. I've been having ongoing dialogue with someone who I know from a free speech group that we were in years ago, like kind of the original Jordan Peterson movement at U of T or whatever, and he is an evangelical Christian, and he's been commenting on a lot of my videos, so I've been preparing a response to some of his criticisms of me, and as I've been working on it, clarifying my ideas, it really makes me reflect and realize on some of the key fundamental differences between me and a fundamentalist Christian or a religious person, and also why I feel like I'm going to issue sort of a counter challenge here. But basically, the first thing I just wanted to say is the person I've been talking with doesn't acknowledge that there's a genocide going on in Gaza right now, for example. So they think that that's propaganda and it doesn't technically qualify. And we've been talking a lot about the Charlie Kirk reaction because for the last, for months now, I've been mostly focused on in the media talking about being critical of the U.S. government, especially ICE and how they're treating migrants, and also what's going on in the Middle East, which he doesn't care at all about. In fact, he thinks, people have every right to expel illegal people from their country, so there's really no issue there. And the thing with the Middle East scenario, in his view, I believe he's communicating, is, Hamas are a terrorist organization and they keep provoking Israel, so Israel's basically just responding to terrorism, and that's all that is. And so there's, those aren't really the groups that he feels are in need of empathy, for example. And when I'm talking about them a lot, he often, he knows that I am a fan of Marx. I'm not a Marxist. I'm certainly not a Marxist-Leninist, but I like Hegelian Marxism. It's something that I much appreciate the Marx for his critique of capitalism, because I'm an anti-capitalist. I think capitalism has evolved into a pathological system that's going to kill the whole planet, including us, if we don't. I don't even think we. Honestly, I'm pretty black-pilled, but the point is, he seems to not understand a couple things also about Marxism, and I think it's because he's a religious person. And so I want to just clarify kind of some of my topics quickly on Christianity, and then explain why I think that I see that the Christian reaction that he's having as an evangelical Christian. He's much more, usually he wants to bring the conversation back to Marxist-Leninism in Russia and Cuba and how they persecuted various groups, homosexuals, and especially in his case, what he's really focused on is he's an evangelical Christian. His background, his ethnic group was suffered under, I guess, Stalin, and were persecuted for their religious belief, and that's why he sees the West as superior overall always to communism or Marxism or anything like that. And there's so much nuance in all of this, right? So I will reply to this. Also, he accuses me often in conversation of being just ignorant and propagandized and stuff. So, I just want to talk again and clarify a few things. One, I've decided to take him up on that. So I went to the local library, the Toronto library, and got a bunch of books on Cuba, Russia, American books by, Oxford Press with good academic authors and stuff, and literally doing a deep dive just into the history of Cuba, especially during the revolution, and same with Russia. Now again, I'm not a Marxist-Leninist, so I'm not here to defend Lenin or Leninism or Cuba. I'm not going to denounce Cuba. I think Cuba is morally superior to the United States in a bunch of ways. They absolutely did, for example, persecute homosexuals in the Cuban Revolution, especially between 1960 and 1980, and they made them go work in forced labor camps. Now, I obviously think that's abhorrent. I wouldn't do it. The thing I think that this is making me realize is that this is the difference between open systems and closed systems. Because he's an evangelical person, I think, his whole system it's a closed system. It's opposed to evolution, growth, and change, and it views things as in and out. Modern Marxism is completely open-ended. So I don't know anybody that I don't know anyone that would seriously defend Stalinism today. Even modern Marxists. The whole point of socialism, broadly speaking, is to look at experiments and analyze them and see what worked and what didn't. So when I say that I'm broadly speaking a socialist, or that I like Karl Marx, it doesn't mean that I'm endorsing or like Leninism or anything like that, or even a more like I like Che Guevara, for example, right? And you can say, well, Che Guevara was a Marxist-Leninist, so therefore you're playing a game because you like him, but you would denounce anyone that's connected to the Nazi regime, which I would, of course, and stuff. And if this is all part of a much larger, broader, like, this is the problem with being more developed in some of this stuff, is that the everything you have to understand everything you're talking about in a bigger context, right? So I would also like to clarify that, like, I have a formal education, and I've studied propaganda, and before I got started becoming in media myself. So like when I my 2 degrees are in my BA is in English Lit, and then my master's is in journalism. So with my BA, I studied a lot of mass comm and other Canadian studies classes, things like that, while I was there. So I've been really following Noam Chomsky and stuff like that. Had an example of since I was a teenager, at least, because I was into punk rock, so I'd get like DVDs, Rage Against the Machine, Propaganda and stuff. And they usually had like intellectual stuff on the background. I like documentaries and stuff. In this case, it was Peace Propaganda in the Promised Land, the U.S. media and the Israel-Palestine conflict, and that was in 2004. So I've been aware of what's going on in Palestine since 2004. And then when I got to Carleton University and started taking mass comm classes, we had to watch more documentaries about this stuff, and we had to watch a lot of Chomsky, stuff like that, documentaries like Why We Fight. And I'm always hyping that people should read, especially a lot of Chomsky's sort of like media control, to understand the American media better, and also seminal texts on propaganda like Edward Bernays. Like the average American or North American has no idea how much of their culture is constructed for them by guys in boardrooms. It would blow their mind if they actually knew. Anyway, so I was trying to figure out how am I supposed to. My friend who doesn't acknowledge, let's call him my friend, who doesn't acknowledge this genocide in Gaza. Like, the UN has come out and found that Israel isn't committed, but committed genocide. Amnesty International agreed, Human Rights Watch agreed, Doctors Without Borders agreed, a bunch of other organizations agreed. A bunch of people. I had a list of stuff here of like all these documented kids with headshots and all this stuff. Like it's I couldn't figure out how someone would not be able to acknowledge this, and so I was trying to watch stuff on the BBC, and they'd have people come on and try to and Britain gave Israel $500 million worth of weaponry during this, so they're like culpable for them. My whole point is like, this is really, this whole fucking mess is Britain's fault. And Zionism, by the way, in my opinion, absolutely is a Christian product. This whole fucking mess is the result of basically Anglo Protestants, British Protestants, and white people in Europe are just super violent, and they have these fucking ideologies and these religions that have been perverted into these competitive institutions where they've literally caused world wars in the name of capitalism and imperialism and nuke people and all this other shit. The net effect of these religions hasn't been positive overall. That's why I think we need a new type of religion if we're going to talk about like how we're going to civilize these people that need the training wheels. But also the eschatologies of religion, like religious prophecy, and actually like the way like Bible Belt Protestant evangelicals are passing like government legislation in the U.S. to hasten the destruction of the environment to bring about the rapture. Like, I'm an environmentalist. I'm directly opposed to these people. Like, and all these end times prophecies that people want to like fight over in the Middle East. Like, this is why institutional religion is one reason why it's so poisonous, in my opinion. But anyway, I guess one of the ideas is that they're going to say that it didn't qualify as a genocide because you can't prove that the intention was to, eradicate these people. And 80% of because Israel is the occupying military force in an occupied country, and Hamas is in my opinion, a U.S.-backed group to give Israel something to keep attacking and justify this narrative. My friend thinks this is all justified, right? But most of these victims, 80% of them are children. So the whole thing is weird because kids have no culpability in this. And you're not supposed to be slaughtering kids like the IDF do all the time, and it's extremely gross. Like, what I was going to get at too is that if you study the difference between like Paul's Christianity as an institution and the actual historical Jesus, there's the real Jesus would be much more about like trying to tell you to have empathy and for people at the bottom, the marginalized and the vulnerable and stuff, and would definitely not be about like any of this large-scale war or nationalism, or I can't see him condoning any of this, and he would definitely, it just feels like, watching people in Nazi Germany like watch what's happening and not be like, yo, this is what's happening, right? Like it's bizarre. But yeah, the whole thing again is, I know that because I've been following this since I was 21, so more than a decade and a half. Like it's been an ongoing genocide. They've been showing us maps and graphs the entire time. This is the size of Israel. This is the size of the Palestinians in terms of population and territory and stuff. And it's on a graph. You can see it's declining with the end goal of having them erased, and they've essentially reached the end point. So it's something that educated people watched happen in real time, like people that were helpless to do anything about it really, other than try to like influence local politics, but ultimately just watch it play out. And I do think that the person I'm talking to, because he's an evangelical Christian, just doesn't care about Muslim kids. I think it's just a tribalism thing. And so and I'm in this weird position where I don't feel any obligation to defend like Stalinism or anything like that, but I fully acknowledge all the bad things that happened under Marxist-Leninist regimes, and I still like Marx. Stalin is to Marx what Paul is to Jesus, like that, and that's what else I was going to get at. Like, I don't think people understand that like certain things are not connected. Like Marx never met Stalin. They are not directly connected in any way. And Stalinism is not Marx's critique of capitalism. It's Stalinism. It's a whole thing, right? And it's like Paul's Christianity is not Jesus's movement. The historical Jesus movement is different and had different ideas and teachings than the institutional church, just Christianity, which is something that's evolved and been created as an institution over centuries. They're not the same thing. And so that's something else. I'm much more inspired by the actual historical Jesus and his teachings than I am by these institutional ideas that people have. It's also odd for an evangelical Christian to try to score ideological points against Cuba for their persecution of homosexuals, because as a genuine, I don't know what word I want to use, socialist or humanist, or someone who just believes in like freedom and equality equally for all, and I don't believe that God has created me as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed man is in any way superior to anybody else or anything like that. Like we're all morally the same under the Creator, right? Like I just think that I can understand why I am condemning Cuba's behavior, but like let's acknowledge like the reason I don't like Charlie Kirk and Christian nationalism and all this institutional Christianity is because if it was in complete control right now, it would absolutely be persecuting homosexuals. So it's a weird position for you to have there, unless you're just trying to expose me as being a hypocrite, and I'm just saying I don't endorse this to begin with, so your point is mute. There's other stuff I'll get into, but I'll keep this video under 15 minutes. So I'll just say that with Christianity also, I don't believe that, I don't know how to talk about things like end times prophecies, and that's what I was getting in my last video about rationality. Like, I don't take religious prophecy seriously. I don't know how a rational person can want other people to. Maybe subjectively you can believe in it, but you should understand why you can't expect other people to want to share in that as some sort of, like, not to pass any sort of policy or law around it. And fundamentally, my metaphysical views about God and everything are, and what reality is, you have a theory about reality, right? In my opinion, and the way I just see things working in nature, is that it is all about evolution. It's about personal growth, like spiritual growth, learning. And I don't share the Christian view of like the afterlife in the same way and stuff, but the whole point metaphysically, like I do believe in the soul, because I believe that consciousness is something that can't be explained in a materialist paradigm, and those of us who have it, especially metaconsciousness, I just call that a soul. We have it. It's not a material byproduct of, it's not an epiphenomenon. It seems to be the universe, like a chunk of the universe is looking at itself and being represented by a physical brain in this sort of simulation we have. Like, physics is downstream, in my opinion, from consciousness, is my point. So yeah, there's a spiritual aspect. This whole world is spiritual, but it's not about fear and guilt and just being here to follow rules and then die or anything. It's about here to have experience. Like, as someone who studied like formally and then informally, like for a long time, Western civilization and the great minds, I agree that there's a dualistic approach that you need to take if you want to really personally grow. Plato, one of the greatest philosophers ever, believed that you could just understand God through studying everything objectively, like the like math, the physical world and everything. And it was just, you just needed to study things objectively, and that would bring you closer to God. Then you have Dante, who has this other idea that you need to have like personal experiences and stuff. And I think that you have to synthesize those two people together. Like, I'm always studying science and quantum physics and different things, and trying to understand like how that could apply to the mind-body problem, for example, consciousness. But also you have to actually have experience and reflect on it, love and grief and all these things, and combine them. And that is a process of evolution, and that's so fundamental to the way I view reality. And evangelical Christians are completely opposed to that. They think that, they're just here to follow rules, and that this extends to society, right? Like, we don't need to improve society. Utopians are stupid. We'll never get to utopia. Heaven in the next life is utopia. We're supposed to be content with this world and just follow these rules and blah blah blah. Completely opposed to this kind of thinking from a spiritual point of view. And people, for example, who are homosexual, they're not abhorrent or confused or corrupted by sin. They're just the way they are by nature. They're one of God's creatures. I think telling God that it made a mistake, or that gay people are corrupt, would be offensive to the concept of God. God would, wants us to love all of its children. Homosexuality is completely natural. You can observe it in nature all around us. So I don't know how to, whatever argue with, like, even as a straight person, it's obvious to me, because I'm not blinded by religious ideology, that it's a natural thing. So my whole point is that I wish these Christians would just be more loving, more open to personal evolution. You can still be a believer in God without needing all the other crap that's come along with it. And those are some thoughts I just wanted to share with people as I prepare a larger response to this guy. So love to hear your feedback. Thanks again, and see you in the next video.